Don't shine so others can
shine
see you.
so others can
Shine
see
so
you.
that through you others
Shine
can see him.
so that through you others can see him.
And so we continue our study of the book of Ecclesiastes, and we're glad you're here. By the way, it's great to have a clan. The Michigonian clan has arrived, and it's been like a family reunion, right? So everybody's here. It's good to have the grandkids, and we got some men folk I see. So we got two husband types, so it's good to see Kyle and Ashley. And actually, it's actually Dr. Ashley Rodriguez, and she has achieved her doctorate. That's awesome, physical therapy. And I believe Kyle you're a minister, and you're also in training, but you're at Peace Church. That's awesome. And then another minister down the pike. When I get to know the Myers, there was only one church in Michigan. Now I guess there are two. Not just Calvary, but I guess Peace. But it's Josh Carhan and, of course, Alyssa. And they're now married folk. And I'm sure grandbabies or something in the future. I'm sure mom and dad, 33 years married, Wendy and Randy are here, of course. So they're having an awesome time as a family. And Jason's still looking for a gal. So if you're available, please meet Jason afterwards. We'll try to help assist him in that way. But we are glad that you're here, and I'm looking for the Tallaricos. Are they here? I don't see the Tallaricos. They're downstairs. Had an amazing time this past week. What a high water mark, because their son, Josh Tallarico, is now Dr. Josh Tallarico. I had the privilege to sit down in on his defense of his dissertation in his first PhD, and it was an amazing journey. I was privileged to be there as a friend, but also a fellow student, and I just was overwhelmed by emotion. It's so germane to this moment, because I remember a day when Josh Tallarico was lost. I mean, way off in left field. I remember climbing up a mountain called Owl's Head with Brian, and we got separated. We were doing something you should never do. We got off the trail, we bushwhacked, we thought we could speed the descent. It was a very precarious, dangerous thing that we were doing. And somehow, the three of us got separated, and Josh was not, when we got to the bottom of the mountain, he was nowhere to be seen. And there was a Pemigewasset River that was raging, and so we got away from the river just to kind of see if we could hear anything, and we hear this distant help going out. So that was Josh's cry for help. So Brian and I jump across the ford of the river, we get back, we start to climb back up the mountain, and we find this young man, Dr. Josh Tallarico, sitting on a rock, and it was not a good moment. I can't tell you exactly what he said, because we're in a church, and it was a series of F-bombs, and it was not the forgive word, okay? It was just perpetual. He just went over and over again, and he declined the verb so many different ways. I had never heard it quite done like that. Josh was a kid, grew up in our youth group. Josh was a kid who just got into the drug scene. You've heard his story. And he was looking for meaning in a lot of different type of drugs. And I remember those days. I remember visiting him when he was in prison and just trying to be a source of encouragement and hope to him. And then one day we were down at Ocean City, Maryland. We were talking with Tom and Mary, trying to just figure out a way, because we knew he was somewhere down at the beach, and that he was living on the beach. And so the girls and I, one day we were at the beach, we decided to go looking, and we found this kid. I mean, hair full of sand. He was literally living under the boardwalk. He had mastered the art of living off of $1 per day, and just a lost place. I remember taking him out for lunch and hearing his story, and his mind was just in a dark place. It's why it's such a God thing. I mean, it was such an honor to watch him defend his study, which was all about recidivism and how to stop, how to help people who are homeless get over their drug addiction, and the part that Jesus plays in that. And it was a phenomenal product, a great scholarship that will no doubt impact people who are trying to have a permanent snap from the addiction of drugs. So mad respect to, again, Tom and Mary, and I I was to tell you that. Oh, by the way, I'm supposed to tell you this. I will get to my sermon, but this is like preview of September 2. There's a new procedure coming, and if I don't say this, I will be in trouble. So if you have children in grades 1 to 2 or 3 to 5th class grades, you're going to accompany your parents, your kids, into the auditorium, new change of pace. About 15, 20 minutes in, Aaron will then release your children to the back. Their teachers will be back there with signs, names, to attract your kids to the first grade class, first, second, and third to fifth grade class. And that's where you'll meet them in the back. They'll identify themselves, and then you can pick them up. And you'll hear this many, many times. But you can pick your children up if they're grades 1 to 2 in room 109, 3 to 5th in room 106. The pre-K, same procedure, drop them off at 10:30. And we are still needing 3 teachers that can help us. If you could assist for the 5th Sunday of the month. It's only, 5 times a year or something like that? So if you could help us, that's it. And we have our roster filled 3 times, or 3 teachers for those 5th Sunday moments. We would love to talk with you. So last week we launched the study, and we began looking at this thing of meaningless. Do you have meaning, or do you have a sense of meaningless? Are you like Josh Tallarico? Are you in a place where you're trying to understand why God has put you on this planet? Last time we did a 5,000 view survey, and we tried to help you understand that God is obviously in this book, but it's not a book that teaches us much about God. That's the principle. It actually tells us how dark and how costly it is when you don't have God as the epicenter of your story. And so when you come to the book of Ecclesiastes, so many cults come to this book because they get some theology that's not good. It's kind of like people who go to the pseudepigraphal writings or the writings that are the apocryphal writings. They come there because they say some pretty crazy things. They're not part of the canonized Word of God. But this is. And so people, when they look at this, sometimes they say, what in the world? Do we believe Solomon? Let me remind you that Solomon was a man who had received a handoff. His dad did all the hard work. His dad fought all the wars. His war chest was large, and it went consistently to fight the enemy. And now that Solomon is in charge, King Solomon, there are no more wars. And so he has access to all the money, and he has access to all the handoff that his dad had given him. They set him up so that he could explore everything, every sensory desire. He could be the guy that could go after these impulses, and he did. He did not restrain in any way. And so when you come to the book of Ecclesiastes, there's this existential theme at times, and you're thinking, really? Other times you find that there's just this hedonism, that the purpose of my life is to satiate me. Is that where meaning comes from? Is that where I'm supposed to spend my life? And in the pleasure calculus concept, that what brings the most amount of pleasure must be right, and the least amount must be wrong. And so we looked in hang glide form, and we found, again, a man that is trying to teach us. And so we begin now to just kind of begin the journey through. So if you have a Bible, please turn to chapter 1. We want to get into this book and really begin to talk about the 3 things that he's learning here. First thing is that nothing is changing. And so he goes right there, and he starts by saying in verse 4, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains the same. And so I'm going to ask you a question. Can you tell me the names of not your grandparents, but your grandparents' grandparents? Can you tell me their names? Some of you probably can. Some of you have done this whole Ancestry.com thing, and you may have gone through that, and that's kind of cheating. But could you tell me their names? I can't. I mean, I know that my 12th descendant, I'm a 12th descendant to the Mayflower, blue blood, through my mom's side. But I know Elder William Brewster, but I don't know a lot of the people between that. You see, here's a man that's telling us that generations come and go and people forget your names. And it's like the circle of life, this monotony of life. Boredom sets in. If you have teenagers or if you have young women that are blooming into that stage, we have a granddaughter whose favorite word right now is boring. So we were out on Lake Redmond doing a little canoeing, and that's, it's not playing with a digital gadget. We want to get away from that. And so she's sitting in there trying to fight off the spiders, and she says, "I'm bored." Because life is so boring, right? When you're out there floating on top of water, and Solomon said that you can try so many things, and it comes back to boredom. We talked about last time, you're going to always find somebody that's faster than you, prettier than you, smarter than you. You're going to find somebody who makes more than you. You work really hard to get the promo, and your neighbor gets it, your neighbor in the office space. And so this idea of rhythms and complexity and diversity in nature continues to do its thing, and that's not a bad thing. When God installed this planet, when he spoke it into existence in 6 24-hour photoperiod days, and he spoke it and it was so, he put into this world these rhythms that happen. And so we have this thing called gravity. Aren't we thankful for gravity? Wouldn't it be cool if gravity could be lifted for one brief moment in the service and we could astro project around the service, right? Just to kind of float like they do when they get above certain altitudes in planes. But the Wright brothers determined that they were going to take advantage of this thing called gravity, and they learned through failure and success how to get a plane to take advantage of gravity and leave it for a while and to float above the surface of the world, of the earth. And so this thing of meaninglessness, we are hearing it over and over again. He loves that word. It's the word hebel, and it's the word that's about breeze. It's about puff of smoke. Here today, here for a moment, and gone. And these moments of life, the transient nature of life is so crazy. So Psalm 39, listen to what David said, "All mankind stands as a mere breath." That's kind of like a summary of our lives. The Bible says that our life is like a handbreadth, the distance from this side of the hand to this side. That's pretty short. It's faster than a runner. And yet, here's a man who's saying the earth is speeding somewhere, but it's rhythmic, and it doesn't make sense. Another thing he brings is the issue of the sun. And so he comes up with the sun, and he says to us, again, the sun rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rises. And so you have this rhythm. It just doesn't seem to make sense. That things happen in a rhythmic way, and it's kind of boring. If you're in a stuck place right now and you're feeling like my life just doesn't seem to have a lot of meaning to it, maybe it just seems like the circles of life. The Bible says in chapter 3 in this book, there's a time to be born and there's a time to die. But the dash between those two moments can get so predictably hard to endure because it just seems so mindless at times. And so if you're in that moment, if you're in a moment where you're doing life and you're looking at the sun and this boring cycle, the sun comes up and it goes down. And it's predictable, but he goes on. He says the wind blows to the south and goes round to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. And so you can bring up these crazy maps on your phone, and you can see the wind patterns across the entire globe, and you can see how El Nino was blowing. And it starts, and you can't really find the end. We know that Jesus talked about that. Again, the wind blows where it wishes, and you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. But these rhythms happen, and we're on this planet, and we're trying to make sense of why are we here? Is there more to this life than simply trying to get through the rhythms of life? And so our teacher, the man who wrote this journal, the one who had all these resources available, is giving us insights under the sun. And I want to continue to remind you of this. If you do not keep that clear, you will make a mistake in interpreting this book and applying it to your life. 29 times he says, under the sun, that he was not thinking through life as a theist, he was thinking of life as a humanist. Under the sun. He was not getting above the sun. That's why for little Madeline Joy, the prayer for any parent is the day when their child comes to understand that there's an under the sun kind of life, that we can live, again, for the transient things of this planet, or we can choose to see the gospel as the thing that brings ultimate meaning to life. When I get above the sun and see that God is the one who brings meaning to my meaninglessness, that I'm put on this planet for a particular design and purpose, And when that purpose-driven life consumes me and takes me to a better place, man, I'm in a place where I can go forward, and it's beyond just watching sunrises and sunsets. You see, I love how, again, he gives us clarity that this is what can happen for a person who understands that there's more to the life than just the tertiary and the surfacey. And he goes on, talks about the sea. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. And so the sun evaporates quantities of water. Every single minute, water is being evaporated, and it condenses, and it comes back down in the form of rain. And we have these rhythms again, and God replenishes the earth through this cycle of water, if you will. And yet 97% of the water is in that thing called the ocean. 97%. Only 0.01 is up in the sky, but yet God has figured it out for us. He's given us the ability to again, know that he has practically set things in motion. That's part of the point. And yet, here we are again. If we just get caught up on the things that we can see and smell and hear and taste and touch, if that's the only way you look at life, if that's the only way, you're going to come up to probably very dark conclusions. We said the book of Song of Solomon was a book of his first love, and that everything is really spot on in the book of Song of Solomon. He has great wisdom that young dating couples need to look at. You look at the book of Proverbs, and he's backwards looking of what he's learned as a wise man. He's trying to pass off his fatherly wisdom to his children, his boys in particular. And so in those cases, these are books that are so practical. But when you come to the book of Ecclesiastes, we're going to celebrate a God who is present but yet not acknowledged. Remember what I told you last time. If you look through this book, you will not find one particular name for God. You never find the name Jehovah through this book. Only Elohim. It's the creator God name, but not the personal name for God. And so in this moment, you have a guy who is trying to make sense of life, his life. He wants to see, is there something more? He's not quite sure that there is, because he is satiating every component of his life. And so he did all the wine thing, and he had the best of wines, and he took it to an extreme end, and he was drunk a lot of the times, no doubt. And he got to the end of that and thinking, is this all there is? Is that all there is to life? Just getting a buzz, living for the next party moment? He tried the moment with the orgies and the harems, and again, 700 wives, 300 concubines. He had all that sensory. Hugh Hefner had nothing on him, and yet, was Hugh Hefner happy, by the way? The Playboy Mansion and all the things that he wanted us to think that he lived as this fat cat in his silk bathrobe, and he was the man in his slippers, and he experienced life on the highest level, right? Not so convinced. You look at these people, again, the people who are passionate about just trying to get clarity on how they're supposed to live their lives, all the people that we look to sometimes for the wrong things, and it did not make a difference. Not just that, but also nothing was new. And he's trying to remind us again that man wants something new. If you go right here, it says right there, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied, nor the ear filled with hearing. Let me ask you a question. Are you a content person? Are you a content person? And so I think of amazing theologians like Sheryl Crow. I don't know if you've ever listened to Sheryl Crow's theologically deep and savvy words. Amazing. She does say something, though. I like to listen to modernity. I like to hear what they're saying. And she says the secret is not in having what you want, but in wanting what you have. Interesting. So she's saying that when you understand contentment in this life, when you are content with what you have, you'll be a person, again, that understands. Maybe that's the source of meaning. Kipling put it this way, and talks about the fact that there's nothing new under the sun and that the eye is rarely satisfied. He put it this way. He said, the craft that we all modern, the crimes that we call new, John Bunyan had them typed and filled in 1682. So the problems that we talk about and the things that we experience in family life and the challenges that come in marital life, those are problems that have been around from the beginning. There's nothing new under the sun. That's the point. And so, people, they're not satisfied. That's why they get the next iteration of the cell phone. They got to get the next fastest MacBook. They need a bigger, faster car. They need better clothing. They need something that will ultimately satisfy. Extreme sports is another thing. I think people do that. Why do people jump out of a perfectly good plane? I understand there's somebody here that got a gift to that end. That's awesome. They're going to jump out of a plane at celebration. But why do we do these things? Why do people base jump and fight bulls and bungee jump and do spelunking and drag racing and driving around in a car around a track for $400 to get up to speeds of 200-300 miles an hour? Why do they do these things? Why do people hang glide and ice climb and rock climb and do the Iditarod and kayak? And why? Because we all want an experience. I mean, have you ever caught yourself thinking, this is the book. This is the book. When I read this book, it's going to bring such meaning to my life and maybe to my marriage. Maybe sometimes you think this movie is going to be amazing, and it just does not satisfy. Sometimes we need to simply confess what the scriptures say, that the eye is not satisfied, nor the ear filled with hearing. The secret in life that Solomon is teaching us, it's not in having what you don't have, but it's in wanting what you do have. And so have you experienced that? Solomon is saying, under the sun, you're going to never be satisfied. You're never going to have the sense that this is the place where you've finally arrived and you have experienced amazing. And so we come to this time that we live in. We're in a time of reality TV, and we like to live through others' experiences. Have you found that to be your journey? So we got stupid things like Big Brother and The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and people actually waste their lives watching these stupid things. And why are they doing it? People watch programs like Alone. Can they survive in the wilderness? And can they endure to the end and get the $500,000? We like to watch these things like Survivor, and we get into these things because maybe experientially I can live through somebody else. But let me ask you a question. Why are people not satisfied? Why are we not satisfied? The book answers this. We'll get to this in a few weeks. But he has put eternity in man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Augustine says that man is restless until he finds his rest in thee. So why are we dissatisfied? Why are we not fully content? Well, again, I think one of the learnings is going to be under the sun. That if you look to horizontal things to satisfy vertical needs, you will never be happy. You will never be happy. You've got to understand that. That's the key to this book. That this man was looking to horizontal things to meet legitimate needs that he had, but they were illegitimate and incapable of satisfying a vertical need that he had for God. Maybe that's why your marriage is not what it needs to be. If you're looking to your spouse to meet a need that only God can meet, then you're going to be incredibly dissatisfied, and you're going to have conflict in your marriage. Paul David Tripp has done a phenomenal job. I love the book. Favorite marriage book on the planet. It's the one I use with all the couples I'm privileged to help get ready for marriage, helping Kyle and Kayla get ready right now, and they're reading that book. Phenomenal book. But as they anticipate October 20, the one thing I'm trying to burn into their DNA is to realize, make them discern the vertical and the horizontal. In this book, if you don't do that, the 29 times under the sun, and if you don't get above the sun, you're not going to be the person that properly interprets this book. You may misapply this. And so I'm going to tell you and challenge you right up front. Augustine was right. God has put that eternity in your hearts, and it can only be filled up with Him. And so if you start to fill your life up with the things of this world, you go to the dross of the world, the cotton candy we talked about last week, the taste great less filling of the Miller Lite, this promise that it makes that it can't complete and it doesn't come through with. You just think that it has to be this, and you lunge for this big beehive of cotton candy, and is that it? Is that all there is? So that's why we're glad you're here today. And if you're in this questing moment, if you're trying to figure out what is my life about, again, yes, you are horizontal, and we're glad that you understand that there's nothing wrong with any of those things I mentioned about doing those fun things. They're all amazing. You should all try them. Yes, of course, we should try them. But there is a vertical need that cannot be satiated with anything else or anyone else but God himself. And so that's why I love how he ends the book. We'll get to this in a few months. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is the whole summary of the matter, that he kind of goes to the end of his life and he says, I've tried it all. This is the guy who gave us his journal. It's called the Book of Ecclesiastes. He steps out of his race car and he looks at the camera and he says, don't make the mistake I've made, like any great parent would. Please, kids, don't make the mistakes I've made. And so as we think about what he's telling us, again, we're coming to clarity in his words and his wisdom. He said the world really has nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. You can look at the scripture there. But again, nothing new. The same problems that your grandparents faced and went through are the same problems you're going to struggle with. The question is, where are you going to go for your answer? And what are you going to do to deeply meet the deepest need of your heart? Why do we think things are new? Again, we could go there in verse 11. We don't really have time to look at that. But the bottom line is this. I want you to get clear that nothing is understood on this planet, that life does not get any easier if you try to run away from it. I think there are great answers to amazingly hard questions. Ask the hard questions. I think God has answers for those questions. I think that we come to this book, and maybe this book is going to be the book that helps you get clarity. Look what he says. I've seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. This guy tried to check out on life, thinking if I can get away from humanity, maybe I get away in my own little private place as a hermit, maybe that's where meaning comes from. Getting away from all these crazy people, and yet you're locked up with your own craziness, and here's a guy that doesn't have meaning in his life because he's not understood that God is the source of his meaning. You know, the sad thing is, the reality is, 40,000 Americans this year will commit suicide. They'll get so overwhelmed that they will just want to check out. They'll say, you know what? I can't go on. I can't do this anymore. The psalmist said that, he says, why are you so cast down, my soul? Why am I so disquieted within me? And then he answers his own question. Put your trust in God. Put your hope in him. Again, if you're looking to horizontal things to meet your needs in a deep, lasting way, they never will. You need to look to God. Put your hope in God. Here's a man who is reminding us of that. He says, what is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. And again, there are so many things that are wrong. So many things messed up in this world. You can't fix them. If you become a champion for something that's right and good and proper, that's awesome. But are you going to be able to make that amazing difference that you want to in this life? Maybe, maybe not. He's telling us that we need to come to him for those answers. And then finally, he gives us, again, this amazing reality that wisdom and experience will not solve every problem. I'm glad for Dr. Josh Tallarico. I'm glad that he's studied hard and he's got amazing answers. But as he studied these three missions, he did a threefold study as he triangulated his data. He went to old-fashioned York Rescue Mission. He went to Water Street Mission in Lancaster, and then he went to Bethesda in Harrisburg. And he met with these people, and he worked really hard to come up with answers. But again, based on his study and his findings, that the people who embraced a personal relationship with this Jehovah God that in this book Solomon did not, But the people who embraced a personal relationship with him were the people that ultimately found this amazing meaning, and they found the power to stand, and that they found the power to change their meaningless life. And so, I'll just remind you as we wrap. Please be clear. There's nothing under the sun. All of our hope must come from above the sun. That's this book. And if I get that, I have hope for this day. And if you're going to listen to Solomon, he's saying, I've investigated everything visible, and the solutions and the answers are not found in the visible. They're found in the invisible. And that's the God that you cannot see. He who's there. The God who loves us, he cares for us. He wants this personal relationship with us. Unless we understand that, we will not be people who find the ability to rise above the meaninglessness of this life. And so, the journey, the journal, the book that's here for us. My prayer as the worship team comes that we'll take this wisdom and that it will help us as we charge ahead, and that we'll vicariously learn from another, that we will take his learnings and say, I get it. I don't want to make those mistakes. And I want to make sure that those learnings help me to become the person God has called me to be.